Hello, everyone, and welcome to one more episode of our series called Muslim Youth Matters podcast. Today, I think we have another interesting, fascinating episode awaiting us, where we will be talking with none other than our friend Mohamed Hammoud. So welcome on this show, and thank you for joining us, Brother Mohammed.
Thank you very much for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So how about we just jump in, and would I ask you please to start telling us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your journey, the work that you do, and what got you involved in these types of community issues?
Inshallah. So thank you first for having me on this program. I hope that brings value to your listeners. I'm sure it's already bringing value to me. So a bit about me. I'm Muslim. My name's Mohammed. Need I say more? So I'm living in Canada, originally Lebanese, came here 44 years ago. And I thank Allah every moment for the life that He has given me. I always say that Lebanon has been my birth mother and Canada my adoptive mother. So I don't pick one country over the other. I'm very proud of my roots, and I'm very proud of where I've planted these roots here in Canada and where I'm raising my family. And where I'm hopefully making a difference to the community and the various now virtual communities that I'm involved in. So a bit about myself. As I mentioned earlier, alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim, but I'm also a son of this world. So I connect with anyone regardless of their faith. But I do that from the background that we are here for a reason. We are here to connect and to be of service to people. And that is the reason I wake up every day. I'm a father, a husband, a son, a brother. And what gets me going every day is knowing that I can make a difference in people's lives. I try to do that on a personal basis. I start within my home, not perfect, not trying to be, but I'm always self-aware that life is a journey of becoming better every day, improving what we can do, reflecting on what we've done, and trying to make that difference and the change to start with us. I take that to my family. I take that to the community that I work with, whether it's within a religious context or within the wider community here in London and elsewhere. And I also take it into my virtual presence, because I believe, especially today, that the words that we have and the weight that those words can bring and the goodness that they can spread because of technology, we can make a difference. And that change starts with us. So we can be the change that we want to see in the world by being the goodness we want to see in the world and believing that goodness is possible because it starts with us. That's a bit about who I am. I've done various things in terms of my professional background. I've worked for organizations as an employee. I've got my independent consulting firm. I do keynote speaking. I get involved in workshops as a guest on various panels. Really right now, what's driving me is I'm an executive coach, not even really a coach. I'm a good listener, and I try to bring value to the people who engage me to help them become better at what they do. And inshallah, whatever capacity I'm in to serve, this is where my path takes me. So that's a bit about me. Inshallah, I have not bored anyone so far. I can stay on in the interview.
To the contrary, I think it's actually a fascinating journey, a fascinating start. And thank you for sharing with us these personal insights into your life. I don't know to what extent our viewers will know this, but I think they should know this, as I came to know that you have done a TED Talk where you addressed one of the, I think, very important themes related to this series. And I don't want to kind of impose on you which themes to talk about, but I think certainly one of the themes that is very front and center for this whole series and these episodes on the issues that Muslim faith is the issue of Islamophobia. So can you tell us a little bit about, what led you? I mean, this is a big project that you probably undertook to jump on a TED Talk. Were you forced into it? Is this something that you wanted to do? How did this happen?
SubhanAllah, it was maybe January 11, 2018, sitting having breakfast with my wife. And people used to say to me, oh, Muhammad, you should do a TED Talk. I'm like, no, those are reserved for people who are really smart and can speak really well. But I put it as a goal. I said, I would like to be smart and learn to speak really well. And you get nominated, but also you follow through the application process. I submitted an application. I was sitting on a Sunday morning like today, and I said to my wife, what would I speak about? What value can I bring? And I thought, you know what? The thing that I've struggled with all my life is my identity. It's me being this Muslim guy, but also being this, Canadian person, somebody who's lived here as if I was born here. It's me being at once somebody who's not from here and somebody who's always been here. It's about the fact that I've never really been happy with my name and my identity, because for so long I was told my name and my identity were associated with things that were evil or hurtful and full of hatred. And so I grew up believing that Mohammed was something I had to shy away from. And we were told we'd fit in better with Western names, as I say in my talk. And so I became Mike, and I begrudgingly became Mike. I hated it. It wasn't me. But Mohammed wasn't me either, because I was told Mohammed was this other persona. And so I never felt like I could be who I really was meant to be. What the heck was that, right? And I took on different names. I was at one time Mikhail, and that's probably the one I resonated with most, because I gave that name to myself. Actually, my friend gave it to me, but I wore it, and I felt it was fancy enough of my, difference personality, but also of who I could be. It was something I was branding myself with. Later, I became Miguel when I went to Spain, and it was in Spain that I awoke and I saw all the Islamic heritage, and I thought, this is what my dad talks to me about, that stuff that I don't listen very well to. And subhanAllah, it woke me up. And I wasn't ashamed anymore. But guess what? I came back from Spain, and then there was the Gulf War and 9/11. And even though I came out of the closet and became Mohammed, it wasn't easy. Nobody really wanted to connect with somebody named Mohammed, not at work, not in a virtual presence. And it became just very difficult. But I continued to be Mohammed, again, begrudgingly, because I didn't associate with that name. I almost, again, felt ashamed and couldn't be proud of what that name really meant. But when I got on in my years, I married somebody from the faith. I was raising a family, trying to raise them within the Islamic values and the values of being a good person, wherever you are, whatever belief religious convictions you have. But I wanted to bring that into the talk. I wanted to make sure that people knew, wait a minute, I'm no different than you. I've got my issues like you've got your issues. I have my struggles like you have your struggles. I'm raising a family like you're raising a family. I've got a job like you've got a job. You know what? Do you really see that I'm that different? And even if we are different, is that really a reason for us to dislike or hate each other or to treat each other disrespectfully? So we can either look at each other through the lens of hatred, terrorism, and disbelief and disrespect, or we can embrace one another through tolerance at the least, but at most with love and respect and peace and acceptance. And that was the message that I took to a group of over 500 people in Traverse City, Northern Michigan, in a very white group. And I anchored the conference that day. I was the last talk, and when I walked out, I had goosebumps from my own talk because it was passionate. Mind you, you only have 6 minutes to speak. I spoke in 6 minutes, 13 seconds. I knew the talk off by heart, and so did my son here at home. With a short talk, you almost have to commit it to memory. But as I was leaving the studio, people leaving and opening the doors and saying, thank you. I see things differently. Thank you. You changed my life. We are not so different. And I thought, we aren't. And, I wanted to be that ambassador who could show people that we may come from many different backgrounds, but we form one nation. And that was really what the talk is about building bridges, being a human bridge and not being a wall, not using our differences to pull us apart, but using them as a reason to come together. And which is what our belief and our faith really says to us, is find the commonalities between you and people who don't believe like you do. And then build on those commonalities to create communities where it's safe to raise your children and to be who you are and to feel comfortable and to be alive. And I think that's what we are, sent as humans at the least. But if I look at myself as a Muslim, is this not the role of our Prophet, alayhi salatu salam? And, is this not what we are supposed to do, which is embrace the community that may see us differently, but give them the message that we aren't that different at all? So that was a bit about the talk and what my incentive or my drivers were to share that message with a wider audience.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful and inspiring experience with us. The point of all of this project is supposed to be to kind of get to know, raise an awareness for ourselves and then hopefully for society at large about the main issues faced by the youth, Muslim youth, these people growing up in a different but not so different society. So they are part of communities because of, let's call it, an ideological identity. But this, makes me want to ask you, from your experience, and going through you are a member of the community, you do all sorts of work. From your experience, what would you say are the biggest issues that the youth are struggling with, or the biggest challenges awaiting them as they enter into this world as kind of young adults? What would you say are the top issues?
Imam Ali alayhi salam says that, your children were not born at the same time that you were, so don't expect them to behave in the same way that you did. And this is something we forget. I think I connect really well with the younger generations. I'm getting older, feeling older, looking older, but I still have that connection. People see me and I can joke with them, and, whether it's the meme culture or certain music culture or whatever it is, but I connect with them because I've made it a point of knowing what's important with them. And I probably did it better as a friend to these youth as opposed to I did to my own children, because with my own children, I tried really hard to instill these values. Did you pray? Did you do this? Did you do that? But it seemed that with, children in the wider community, I was more understanding. And because maybe the investment was not, they weren't my children, but I did invest in wanting to listen to the youth because we were not speaking their language. We expected them to go to our centers of, our mosques, our community centers, and listen to the lectures that we thought were relevant and important. We didn't, and I'm generalizing here because I know some community centers have done a really good job with their scouting programs and so forth. But I'm talking about in general what I've seen. We don't engage the youth. We don't listen to them. We don't empower them. We don't speak their language. We don't understand their values. We don't understand how their values may clash with ours, and we don't try to find that common space. What we try to do as adults or as parents or as community leaders is enforce rather than empower. So the message is the same whether you're in a workplace, in your home, or in the community. You have to find something common, something that you both can invest in. What do these youth want? They want to learn. They want to experience. They want to grow. They want to laugh. They want to feel safe, because the things that youth today deal with, you and I never did. I dealt with discrimination and bullying and so forth, but the things that our youth deal today because of social media, we can't even begin to understand it. Maybe the only thing that we can understand is the shiny object culture, or, compare ourselves to other people. But our youth are bombarded with that message on a daily basis. So if we stop and listen and feel and connect with them, we understand the pressures that they're dealing with, and that maybe some of the ways that they're going to react to those pressures is by lashing out at us because we just look so different, and we're preaching a playbook that is so different than the one that they're walking and working with. So it means that we have to relax a bit. We have to maybe let down our guard, and even at the price of changing the lens through which we see our own values. This isn't about halal and haram, right? This is about how do you learn a new language so you can speak it effectively with people and encourage them that there's value in what you say that's similar to the value that they're looking for. And when you find that connection, you build trust. You build trust to let them know the door is always open. Whatever you're going through, whatever you need. I'm not here to judge. Muslims don't get it. If God wanted us to judge on this earth, he would have made us astaghfirullah Allahs, right? So, but we're so good at judging everybody, each other and our neighbors. And that's all we do. We see so-and-so, why did they buy this house? Why are they buying that car? Why are they complaining? And we do that with our children, right? We do that with the youth. So we need to forget, and my daughter taught me that, by the way. She sent me a meme and it said exactly that, why are we judging when God is the only judge? So listen to our youth, encourage them to speak to us. And we don't know their language, ask them to teach it to us. Doesn't mean that their values are necessarily better than ours, but that's the playbook they're working with. So if we're going to enter into their scene and be part of their world, it's going to be by the permission that they grant us, not the enforcement that we are going to, break down the door and say, we're here and you do as we tell you. You don't build trust that way. You don't build a relationship. So it's very important to understand what these youth are going through, how we can support them, and how we can invest in them. Because the wrong mentality is that they're the future. The right mindset is that they're already here and they're already living, and they are helping us write our future. We want to be part of that future with our youth. This way, we can see our values flourish. This way, we can see how those values can integrate with the values of the wider community and create a sense of community, even, again, when we're living in a society where not everyone is Muslim. And we tell our youth, that's okay. That is completely okay. They have things differently. This is how, this is from where we start. This is from where we launch ourselves as human beings, is through our, value system. But we first have to establish that, and we do it through building trust with them.
Absolutely. Starting even from your TED Talk, but everything you've been talking about, I think it touches on a lot of very important themes. Some of them have to do, to me, very clearly with issues of identity and a feeling of belonging. And, I think you've been living this and thinking about it and talking about it, but you've been living it your whole life, I think, to a large extent. And do you feel that the youth of today, are they struggling in the same way as perhaps a Muslim youth was struggling a few decades ago with issues of identity and feeling of belonging? In your case, it was to the point of not being sure which name you should be using to identify yourself. And this is something I think that is very, very present in all of our communities, all of us growing up Muslim. I think we have this dichotomy of personalities, or a split of personalities where, you think you're supposed to be one person at home and another, or in the community, and another person in the outside world, in the Canadian society. So do you feel that this is still an issue? And if it is, then where does it lead? So when that issue remains unaddressed, it's not something that someone comes to terms with for themselves. Where could it potentially lead? What are the ramifications of this?
So, your question started out by asking, are they dealing with identity crisis like we did? Yes, but and I'd say probably more magnanimous than we ever did, right? Because the impact of technology and how it brings people together, with its positive and its negative impact, is a lot more immediate and forceful than it ever was in our time, right? It's literally in the palm of their hands, and the message is that more powerful than it was for me having to watch it and get it through written or written media or the TV. Now it's right in front of me, and it comes to me even when I'm not asking for it. We're bombarded with that messaging, right? So I'm still struggling with my identity at 52, almost 53. I did even more recently. I was part of federal elections. I thought I'd win. I wanted to win. Part of it was, of course, it was to serve the community. Of course, it was this immigrant boy who was going to get to be a member of parliament. But of course, part of it was the ego. The reality is we all have these dreams of what we want to do. But when I lost the elections, I took it really hard, and I was broken. And I said to my wife, it feels like I've been hiding behind these masks all my life. And, I tried to be the good Muslim husband. I married somebody from overseas, as my parents would say, taking you shopping. No disrespect to anyone, but I used to say, I'll never go shopping back home. And I met someone and fell in love, and alhamdulillah, we started a family. But I was trying so hard to be the perfect Muslim husband, father who didn't listen to music and didn't dance. But before, I still love music, still love to dance. You don't want to see me at an Arabic wedding. I've gone to Mecca 3 times, but if I lose it, I lose it. I don't know if your listeners want to know that, but there's a point that I'm sharing. The thing is, we decide how we live our lives, whether we're making mistakes, whether we're moving forward. We have these confines of judgment, and we tell people this is what it is to be Muslim. And if you're not this good Muslim, then something's wrong with you. So my daughter wore the hijab for 16 years of her life. We struggled when she was 12. It's not 16, sorry, till she was 16. So she wore it, I think, for about 8 years. At 12, she started rebelling, saying, I don't want to wear it. It became, half, then the turban. And then finally, Dad, you did your job. And I said, you're right. You have agency over your body. I feel like part of me is dying if you take it off, but it's not my body. Do I prefer that she keeps it on? Of course, but that's not my decision. And so I had to come to terms with my children making decisions that maybe weren't my values, but I had to still respect because these were decisions they were grappling with. I've done my job, rightly or wrongly, but you get to the point where you can't enforce. You've got to support. So where does this take us? The identity that we tell people this is what it's like to be a good Muslim, by whose playbook, by whose standards, right? So I was telling you that I struggle with my identity and these masks that I wore because I grew up here. It was hard for 30 years of my life living like a Canadian. And I say that, as a person who is from Lebanese origin, because we are all Canadian, but you know what I mean? They call me Mohamed al-Kennedy, right? For a reason. But the point is, I tried hard to fight being more Muslim so that others would accept me as a Muslim. Mm-hmm. And I fought hard to be a good Canadian, Westerner, so that non-Muslims would accept me. And I did all of this because I was trying to find a place I belonged. I didn't belong to my community because they all saw me dressed differently, dressed in bright colors. At one point I had, I would do highlights and, right, I did things that were considered Islamic, right? This was when I was growing up, but the point is I did things that were breaking the mold. And then on the Western side, I wasn't Western enough. So where do we have this identity? What do we do today? We try to force youth to confine and conform to a certain identity and not give them the opportunity to make mistakes and to learn. We tell them that making a mistake is wrong, that failure is horrible. But we need to be there to pick them up like they were when they were children. If they fell, we picked them up. We didn't push them back down. Something happens when a child turns 12, 13, 14, and now when they make a mistake, we curse at them, we yell at them. The thing that I learned that Canadians, Westerners do really well is they engage in conversation. They listen. Not all, but these are the good things that I've been able to take from the non-Muslim family and apply it. And the things that maybe we did really well is we believed in our identity and who we were and our values. But why not find a common ground? We're no longer living in Lebanon or Iraq or Iran or Saudi Arabia. We're living in Canada. What are the great values that this culture and this community have? Let's take those and offer them to ourselves and to our children. And then what cultural values do we have and religious values do we have from elsewhere that are good, that help us grow? Bring them to the equation and then write a new playbook. If we don't do that by involving and empowering our children to be part of the conversation, we'll be talking to the wall. And we'll look back at community leaders and say we did it wrong, and then we'll wait for the next generation, and that generation won't start doing the mistakes that we did till they're 30-something, having their kids and realizing that they're just repeating the mistakes that their parents did. So we as a community, integrated into Canadian society, to the wider community, have to step back and say this isn't about preserving the faith. This is about preserving our sanity. This is about understanding where do we find the common ground to be able to not create a new halal or, la samahullah, walk into a haram, but to find the new way that we can actually embrace the good from this community and bring it together. And that helps us become good community members to people outside of our community. They see us as ambassadors. When somebody at work says to me, thank you for being a good ambassador of what a Muslim looks like. There wasn't a prayer room at my work 20 years ago. There's a meditation room now, and they do call it a prayer room, but I asked them to call it a meditation room for people who don't pray, that they can go in it and feel that they belong. When I used to get invited to the company socials, I said, I can't go because of alcohol. I said, maybe we can have a table where people don't drink can sit together. Lo and behold, Out of the 30 tables, 8 became non-alcoholic because other people who weren't Muslim chose to sit at tables where there wasn't alcohol served. So we find that commonality, we brave the conversations, and we try to figure out what do we have in common that is good, and can we make it better?
These are all excellent, excellent points. It triggers a whole lot of thoughts and questions in my mind, and I'm thinking which one to address first. But so before going to those, I think there's an issue, maybe 2 issues that I'd like to explore with you. The first one is when you said, we would be talking to the wall. If we do not have those conversations, we do not catch ourselves in time having those conversations and changing the way we are with the youth, with our children and the youth of the community, we're soon going to be talking to the wall. And I'd like to unpack that a little bit with you. What does that mean? Where could this lead to? Because I think, and we've had a number of different guests here. Some of them have looked, for instance, at how you basically can become, even for yourself as a youth growing up, you may become peripheral and marginalized in society. And then this can take you down all sorts of paths. On the other side, there may be mental issues, mental health issues that arise as a result of this, the feeling of loneliness and depression and that can result. And, based on your own experience, dealing with the youth and dealing with community members, when you say, I sense an urgency in your voice to say, we need to change, we need to address these things, have those conversations. What is triggering this urgency? What is pushing you to say, right, we need to do more before it's too late? What does the too late look like?
The too late is, I've seen so many generations get lost, and I don't mean get lost, but lose themselves, and some haven't come back. So, I've seen youth in their teens and in their mid-20s get marginalized and, go to the periphery of what it's, and you wouldn't even know that they're, they don't have the values that we tried so hard to instill in them. And here, I want to stop saying Muslim, non-Muslim, because I can tell you there's a lot of good Jewish households and Muslim households and Christian households and non-religious households and who have incredibly good human values, right? But I'm talking within the context of what we maybe teach or the values we instill within our religious centers, right? We try so hard to instill cultural, religious values of an old tradition that is maybe not keeping up with the times. And it's only when we bring in leaders and community leaders and youth leaders who are able to speak the same language as our youth and listen and engage them and let them know this isn't a question of just halal and haram. Then you're almost sitting on the fence. And as parents, you're sitting there thinking, what's he telling my kids, right? But when you see that connection, and when you see your daughter look at you during the conversation and, point at you with her eyes, like, did you just hear what he said? And you think, oh, yeah, I did that, right? I've made that connection. Even though she's judging me for having made that mistake as a father, she's connecting with me, saying to me, did you hear? Did you listen? Now, what do I do after? I have a conversation with her, say, yeah, I guess maybe how could I have done that better? This is why I did that. I was struggling. That's why I tried so hard. And, and it's not to say my kids are, but I love my children and they're beautiful. But are they the children of a sheikh? As I grew up, I thought, I'm a Shia Muslim, by the way. We're all Muslim, but, I'll still a bit of my background. I've been to Ziyara maybe 4 or 5 times. I've been to Mecca 3 times. You'd never know looking at me. You wouldn't know I'm Muslim. And, by the way I behave, you wouldn't know. My faith is internal to me and my relationship with Allah. That's the first thing. If we come from that background, that faith is between the individual and the God, then that's a light that is always within them. It'll never get extinguished. Let us, the leaders in the community, not be the ones who put out that light because we fought so hard to keep it burning. So when I say that sense of urgency, because I've seen way too many children, too many youth who have become marginalized, because they didn't have the right support system. They didn't have the right network to support them and hold them and hug them, embrace them, and let them know this isn't what I want to see, but I'm here for you, right? As a father, Middle Eastern father, Muslim father, that may be really hard for me. I told you when my daughter decided to take off her hijab, I felt like somebody died. I cried for 2 months, but I still love my daughter. And I'll take a picture with her on her graduation when she's not wearing a very Islamic dress, because I don't care. And I'll have people say to me on my Facebook post, oh, is that your daughter that dressed like that? I'm like, yep, that person is blocked. You know what? Because in spite of her differences with my own values, she remains my daughter. Nabi Nuh alayhi salam stood there, and when his son was separated between him and the mountain, and there was, being engulfed with water, he was still calling out to his son to join him. And he knew his son was not embracing the faith. Mm-hmm. And so we cannot, stop calling out. And I think, the grandson of the Prophet, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he says, Allah min nasir yunsirni, who is listening to me, who is coming to my help? This message wasn't for us to go back to a time in the desert to fight a fight that isn't our fight anymore. But the fight that we have today is the fight to stand with values, but to know how to communicate those values in a way that will bring people towards us. This is more than handing out a water bottle and a rose in the name of an incredible figure from 1400 years ago. This is handing out our hand and having the ability to speak a language so that people who have never heard a story, it will resonate with them. So when I say we have to be careful that we're not speaking to an empty mosque or it's, like speaking to the wall, it's because we're trying so hard to bring the conversations people had 1400 years ago or 40 years ago or even 4 years ago. And we don't understand the difficulties that is facing youth or people like me, people who are struggling still with my Islamic identity. And how do I mentioned to you earlier that I was going to be, working towards becoming a member of parliament. Inshallah, I'll try that again. I had a lot of reckoning to come to because the party that I wanted to represent maybe had certain values that weren't the values that I embrace in my home. And I had to learn, how do I have those conversations? I'm not going out and saying as a Muslim that I promote a certain lifestyle or I don't promote it. I say as a human being and as someone who wants to take on the role of a civil servant in this country, I have to represent everybody equally and equitably, regardless of their gender, their sexual preference, their background, their ethnicity, their religion. And is that the communication that we're having in our mosques? Is that the language that we're using with our children? Is that the language that we're using with people in our community, that we are willing to treat you equally and equitably because we expect that for ourselves? If I don't want you to see me because I'm a Muslim as a terrorist or as somebody who is out to get you, then I need to stop being someone who's out to get everybody else because they act or look or feel or behave differently. So us Muslims have to be ready to engage and accept and embrace so that others will do the same with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think there's clearly in everything that you're saying kind of an urgent need to reform, modernize the language, language writ large of what, how we understand and how we communicate what our religion is to ourselves and to others, right? I think there's...
And Brother Jafar, if I may, just because the word modernize, I want to be careful with our use of the word modernize because, when we think of modern Muslims, now all of a sudden mean it's a loaded term. Absolutely. It's a loaded term. By modernize, I mean understand and unpack the difficulties that we're living with in a non-Islamic country or a country that is secular, where we still want to practice our faith and embrace our values. Mm-hmm. And there are values that are different. And modern meaning that we're not in 680 AD, we're in 2021 with a global pandemic and our economy is falling apart. How do we have an up-to-date response as community members who have a certain religious conviction, who want to integrate and be part of the conversation and not external to it? And by that, to me, is modern. I'm sure that we share that. I just want to be careful because all of a sudden you say modern.
I agree with you.
And right.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it, to me, the way I understand it is that we're not really talking about the content of what is there. It's the packaging needs to be updated so that, the values, we're all talking about the same universal values and so on and so forth, but it needs to be contextualized to the time and space where that message is being communicated.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So from there,
what family doesn't want their children to go to a safe school? What family doesn't want to have a job where they're paid well and have their kids do well? Right. We all have the same desires to work hard and to reap the benefits, and so we all have these desires. Why not recognize that it's okay? We just have to, we're not going to make everybody Muslim or Christian or Jewish or, the sun shines on everybody regardless of what you believe. And the mercy of God, right? Yeah, exactly. And the mercy of God reaches everyone, those who share your values and don't. So let the mercy of God emanate from the way that you behave, and let it reach everyone with your words and your behavior.
I think a lot until now, the conversation, we've had a lot of it, and it's fascinating, and there's so much more that can be said. But let me turn the lens, because there's another point that I think is kind of the logical consequence of everything that we've been saying, which is if we're having these identity issues and struggles and crises and so on and so forth, this sense of belonging or not belonging, where is this stemming from? And is it because ultimately it has to do with us and lacks with us? And I think we've addressed a lot of that already, what we can do more and better for ourselves as communities and internally. But what is going on in society? I think today, perhaps the social context is a different one than it was, maybe 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago.
Right.
There's a huge recognition of, for instance, systemic racism and all these projects and initiatives going on. There are attempts to harmonize relationships with the indigenous people, and there's a movement towards that, and a lot of efforts in that direction are being made. Your assessment right now of the situation of a Muslim youth, someone who is a young Muslim growing up in this, dual identity of being a Muslim in a Canadian world, in a Canadian society, to what extent are they still feeling discrimination? They're still feeling, the difficulty of, or not, the difficulty of living in a diverse world where there is a constant pressure to try to fit in. And are we reaching a harmonious end with this, or is it still very much a struggle?
So I think it will always be a struggle, and jihad is always about a constant struggle of the forces within us and the forces with on the external to us, and how we create harmony. And harmony is not where there's always where two forces meet, and where those forces meet is where you create the balance and the harmony. Right? Balance is created from one force pulling against the other. Harmony is being able to accept those two conversing weights and being able to create that balance. That's harmony. To deny that we have made strides, whether it's with the Black Lives Movement and the advance of Black lives, or indigenous communities and righting the wrongs of the indigenous communities, or even Muslims or Jews. Years ago, not very long ago, we were sending Japanese back to their home here in Canada. So to deny that we've made wonderful strides to become more aware as a community and as a country would be wrong. Not just wrong that we do live in a place, North America and maybe globally, we are more aware of systemic racism or talking about it, right? But to deny that exists would be to throw away all the hard work of the pioneers who fought and lost their lives and their livelihoods to actually make those changes. So for me to say, no, it's just as hard as it was when I was, right? Or for people, who were killed or expelled, before, it would deny the hard work that they went through to make life easier for you and I. But the work is not done. The struggle is still alive. Systemic racism exists. The fact that privilege, you and I are privileged, by the way, but there is a greater level of privilege here given to people who are considered to be white mainstream, right? We see that more in the United States. But to think that it doesn't exist in Canada, of course it exists. I probably have more doors open to me before people know my name because I look white, right? It's only if they hear my name, right? So the struggles are there, the challenges are there, but we're more aware of them. And we're kind of on the fulcrum now that we can actually take what we're learning and rather than change it into an educational opportunity, because, you know, a black person dies, what does every white person do who has good intentions? They go read a book so that they can get educated on what to do differently. I need you to do more than read a book, right? Diversity, this Mohamed Faqih taught me this last year. He said, Mohamed, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. I said, Mohamed, I love that, right? I take it a bit further. While diversity is a fact, it's all around us. Diversity is there in the creation. And inclusion is an intention, something intentional for us to see things differently. Belonging is different. Belonging is me opening the door to a room and sitting back and making space for you to come and sit at the table and for you to break the bread and offer it to me on your terms. That's belonging. So it's not enough to recognize diversity and celebrate it, which is where we're kind of at now. It's not enough to just say that we want to be intentionally inclusive, which is good that we're having those conversations. It's about how are we changing workplaces so that women and men are treated equitably, so that people from different backgrounds, religious beliefs, ethnicities are treated equitably. How do we make those changes? How do we not treat people differently because they wear a kirpa or wear a cross or put on a hijab? Seriously, in 2021, people in Quebec, you're still talking about a woman with a hijab or a person with a kirpa or whatever you have that makes you look different means that you're afraid of me? Wake up. So we have, those are the values that we have to pull ourselves away from and look at where do we need to go? So yes, recognize we've made strides. Awesome. Lots of work still to be done. How can I be part of the conversation? And then how do we come to a table where we all sit and have those conversations? That's, by the way, the reason I wanted to get into politics, and I'll try again, not to become a politician, but because I want to have those conversations. I want them written in our policies. When I spoke at TEDx and I said, we can rewrite the definition of inclusion. If we want to reform a culture of bigotry, hatred, and terrorism, together we will write the definition of inclusion so that we can have peace, love, and acceptance. The only way that we do that is to have it reflected in our systems that are broken, that do treat people differently based on their color and their gender and whatever. So we've got a lot of work to do, Brother Jafar. We've got a lot of work to do. While we have it from the point of view of our own values and beliefs, we have to now engage in those conversations. What I see Muslim youth and Muslim leaders do is they seclude themselves, and our Muslim leaders more, they want to seclude themselves in their confines and in their own communities and in their own mosques, and they don't want to be part of the greater discussion with the community to say, we're here, let's talk.
And this was my next question to you. I mean, what is your assessment of the current state of our community? One, is there a recognition of these issues, first and foremost? Are they even aware that all of these issues that you're talking about? And secondly, is there anything being done? And if so, then is it enough?
Yeah, well, it's never enough, because enough means that you feel that you've reached a milestone and you can look back and pat yourself on the back and celebrate. Celebrate your advancements, but recognize that the mountain will always be there for you to climb, right? It just, each time you get more clear as you reach that summit, but there will always be, you look beyond and say, dang, there's another mountain there, right? And you have to go through the valley to scale the other mountain. But I look at the London Muslim Mosque here, right? And I look at, they're the second mosque in Canada, the first in Ontario. And I look at the programs that they have. I look at the relationship that they have with the community. I look at the alliance that they've created with the media and with other religious leaders. They're integrated. They are integrated. They have a system where if something happens, there's less mahallah, something at a global nature or even local nature, there's communication with the media, there's communication with religious leaders, there's communication with the medical officer. There is communication. They speak, and the people in that community are known. So when I look to the wider Muslim community here in London, I think they're doing something really well because they've become part of the wider community. So I look to the communities that have segregated themselves, again, within the confines of their own value systems and not comfortable enough to have the discussions and come out of their mosques and hold hands with people from other faiths and beliefs it's because they think that they will be protected within their mosques, but they will actually be in a bubble that's not reality. And that's where we lose our kids, because our kids aren't living in that bubble. So yes, I look at that community that's doing well. I look at the community of Wali Al Asr in Niagara and the incredible advances that they're making. They started their program much later than we started one here, and with Al Mahdi Mosque, for example, and they're light years ahead. I look to Ottawa and to the schools that that are now giving options, not saying better, options. All we want to do is give children and youth and each other options, not better, not worse. We're just giving options to say, if you want this, here's an option. So I look into those communities that have only excelled because they've integrated, they've been able to take the good from the good and bring it together. And they have celebrated the fact that my faith doesn't necessarily have to hold me back from being a great Canadian. And being a great Canadian doesn't have to hold me back from believing in my faith, whatever my faith is. So it's a matter of celebrating that difference. And so those two weights may weigh differently, but how do I find that balance and create that harmony? And it's finding that commonality. It really comes back. And we are, if you look at it from an Islamic concept now, we have been told, you have been the best community that God has sent unto mankind, right? Find the commonalities. The best of you are those who do the best works. He doesn't say the best of you Muslims. He said the best of you. Recognize that each one of us, each human is able to do a good thing, and find those commonalities with people that don't share your faith. Have those conversations. Let them know what you stand on and where what you stand for. And believe me, you will be able to create a better relationship with people you work with, people you represent in the community and who represent you. And people will want to become better friends with you. You'll become a lot more likable. I talk a lot about emotional intelligence in my professional world, but isn't that really, right? I just don't use that exact language with my clients. I say, he that knows himself, whoever knows himself will know others, because we are a reflection of a greater force. So let us become the reflection of that greater force by embodying the goodness that, whether you call it God or whatever, I call it Allah. Whatever that force wants you to embrace it wholeheartedly, and don't exclude people because they don't see or feel or believe like you do.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of the things that you're talking about that we absolutely agree on, there's this increased and urgent need for further integration. And this actually moves a long way, a community, into resolving a lot of the other issues once it fully integrates. What goes hand in hand with that, I think, are two things, but I think I can present them to you as one, because I think they're interrelated, which is this huge need for people to step up. There's a huge need for leadership on one side, and there's a huge need for outreach. And so outreach from the community to outside of the community, and outreach from outside of the community to the community. Okay. And to me, the bridge between these is the leadership. So I think from everything that you've shared with us today, I can clearly see that you're someone who believes in leadership. You understand leadership. I think even in your professional career, that's what you do as well. And you coach people in that direction. But in addition to that, about the specific topics and the themes that we're talking about, what I see coming through everything that you're talking about is you are attempting as best you can as a human being to play that leadership role for yourself in your life and in your community. To me, the TED Talk, for instance, or your activity and your awareness within your community, all of these are steps demonstrating very clearly a leadership role that you are recognizing and you're taking part of it. How do we get the youth to recognize this need and desire of their own to want to go in that direction? Because I think that is going to be that bridge, and hopefully that opens the door to that outreach that is kind of so direly needed.
So let's do this authentically. I'm going to say some things here that are maybe a little, well, I'll say them. First of all, I want to address the word integration. And I say it with very much respect because I've used it quite a bit now. And I remind myself to be wary, because integration, not assimilation, which other communities expect of us, but even integration means that somehow we are letting go of something that we have to bring on something else. And what I said to you earlier about the weights, think of integration, that the values that you have, as many as they may be and as weighty as they may be and valuable, and then the values that other systems and communities may have, and just find that balance and then create harmony. So that's my interpretation of integration, not necessarily a melting of one, or I have to, we've never gotten in a fight with our spouse. But when I was younger, she's on the other side of the door. When I was younger, we were told, oh, واحد بده يضحي, or one has to give up, or كسر راس, right? We were told, our parents use this language, right? And not even a compromise, almost like I have to forgo something in order to get something.
Yeah, a full sacrifice. It doesn't
have to be, right? It's right. It doesn't have to be where I'm relinquishing something valuable to me in order to embrace. We are a lot stronger, and we are the entire universe within our hearts. The universe cannot embrace Allah, but Allah can live within our hearts, and we can embrace the entire universe. And so I don't have to necessarily give up something valuable to me to respect something valuable to you. So integration doesn't mean to lose, to gain. So that's the first thing I wanted to kind of say here. The next step is for us, our community leaders. So when I look at, in Canada particularly, around the world for sure, but let's clean up our own home first, right? There's many different kinds of Muslims, there's many different paths, right? But I'll look at the two main ones, Sunni and Shia. Why aren't we working harder to unite and to have, where the Sunnis aren't necessarily just representing themselves and the Shias aren't just representing themselves, but work as a united community, be good role models, because my kids don't know Sunni and Shia and they don't care. Their kids don't know these parameters that we've set up for ourselves because of our cultural and historical and traditional beliefs, right? And so I listen to my children because they do not have these, this lens that is telling them they have to approach something through anger or hatred or a me versus them. So how can I talk about embracing and building a bridge to the wider community that has a much different value system when I'm not even ready to embrace a community that is perhaps closer to me in my ethics and my values, because I still believe we have differences? Find the commonality and find it with the people with you, closer to you, so that you can be stronger as a community. And then as a community, have those discussions with people who have differing values and find those commonalities. Create leadership. When we role model leadership, not role play leadership, now we are giving that role model to the youth to show them we're not talking division. We're not, telling them that they have to break free and give up something to embrace something else. We're asking them to grow. We're asking them to become strong. As you lift weights and you build muscle, you are able to lift something heavier and bigger and hold it. And the weight of that holds you accountable. So if we as a community leaders can hold and role model to our youth and show them we're not talking with divisive language, not to to people within the Islamic community, the wider Islamic community, certainly not to the wider Canadian community, that we are speaking a language based on commonalities. Our children will believe in us. We'll go back to what I said earlier. They'll trust us. They'll see that we are actually believing in what we say and not enforcing it because we were told this is the way it should be. It starts with role modeling and not role playing. So
Absolutely.
That, right, if we can start from there, nobody wants to be friends with a hypocrite. Somebody talks about their best friend in their absence, will talk about you in your absence. So start role modeling the behavior of being a good person, a good human. And from there, I think you'll make mistakes, but you won't err, you won't get marginalized, you won't go out to the peripherals, right? You'll make mistakes because you're human. but you'll be able to recognize those mistakes and hopefully correct them, right the wrongs, and continue building relationships with people closest to you and let it widen out. That is the only way. In the sense of urgency, if we try to tackle the biggest challenges, which is to take all these youth that we think are slipping away from us and bring them and somehow give them a message that doesn't relate to them, it's going to be light and they won't embrace it. We need to build trust. We need to let them know we are in it with you, for you, because of you, with you, through you, and we'll get there together.
I want to add a dimension to this. I think that you can speak to because of, your unique experience and what you've endeavored to do. And I think you're still at the beginning of your journey there. I think there's a lot more great things to come for you in that dimension. I want to ask you about political involvement. And, it could be small or large. It could be in the strict sense of actual, political work, or just the large sense of just political involvement or activism, or just being engaged with issues of the day, contemporary issues. How important is that? It's one thing to know of these things, to talk about them. It's another to actually do work in this regard. Sit down, think, plan, get involved, do things. When I think about outreach, I think this is where it needs to go and what needs to happen. And to me, something like a TED Talk is going in that direction, right? How do you communicate that to the youth? If this is where you feel that this is where it needs to go, does it come naturally to them? Do they just know that this is how it needs to come out, or what?
You ready to be surprised?
Yeah.
They're doing it better than us. They're doing it better than us. They don't see through the blinders that you, and here, when I say you, I don't mean you, Brother Jafar. I'm saying you as in people in my demographic, So they're seeing without necessarily the hatred. When, what do we have been saying for centuries? Shylock said, if you prick us, do we not bleed? Are we not all human? And I've seen my children a lot more responsive and responsible to what is happening in the communities. And when you look at right now, who is holding the banner for many of the discussions that we're having at international levels? Greta Thunberg is 14. Was she 14 and she crossed the ocean? Right? You're talking about a youth. This is somebody who is not even an adult having conversations at Malala, right? So, we look at the youth and the belief that they have in the goodness of humanity, and they find that humility to make us better humans. They are not looking through the otherness that we bring in the conversations that we've learned, and the hatred and the ignorance that has led to hatred, and the unknowing that has led to even more ignorance. So I think we can look to youth and even to children and learn from them and engage them in those conversations. So when my daughter heard me, when I was campaigning a couple of years ago, and she heard me refer a certain way to why I believe we need to embrace everyone in the community, she goes, "Oh, but I thought in our religion that it's haram to do that." I said, I'm not approaching this from a religious perspective. These are people who pay taxes and live in this country, and they have rights to the same thing that you and I do. What people do in how they live their life is not, if they're not hurting anyone, it's not up to me to judge or to say this is right or wrong. I have to represent everyone equally, equitably. I'm not being asked to represent somebody based on their color or their gender or their sexual preferences and so forth. So it's a matter of, again, being authentic. So if my daughter is going to see me have those conversations at home, she'll see me have those conversations outside. Or conversely, if she hears me as a wannabe politician having those conversations outside the home, am I being authentic when I come back home? Am I role modeling the behaviors as a Muslim man to say, I believe in treating your woman respectfully, but then I come home and I shame or blame or have conversations with her or her mother for that are related to my cultural beliefs, not religious beliefs. So it's challenging ourselves to always say, can I be better? Am I doing things better? So your question, and I never answered directly, because it's never that black and white. It's never that simple. I think we can definitely learn from the youth who are not seeing through the lens that you and I do, which is a lens that's already been sullied by this happened, therefore I need to behave this way. So I think open up to youth, engage in conversations with them, ask them, how could things be better? Learn from them, involve them, teach them to be the leaders, so that, a good leader isn't one that tells you what to do, but a good leader is one that says, watch, learn, and then steps away and watches others do it. That's a good leader. So let's build leadership in our communities. So if we're having scouts, teach the young, the young girls and boys to become the good leaders and to role model behavior. If, get the youth to start getting involved in things in your centers, right? Get those same youth to be involved in their schools, to speak on behalf of cultural and religious values that are important to you. Get them involved in the wider community. Get them to talk about the climate. Get them to talk about why the indigenous community is important, right? How does that relate to us? Is that our part of our history or how we face discrimination or racism? Can we actually be Muslims in Canada and not have a dialogue about what the indigenous are still going through? Or Black people? And, don't even get me started there, because how many Muslims still have an issue with, we still use the word Abid. I had to stop myself and think, can I believe, because I grew up culturally with that language, and we have to look at ourselves first before we start pointing the finger at others. We have so much work to do, but Jafar, as I said earlier, it's the work that we still have to do doesn't mean that we deny the great work that we've already done. So the struggle is real, the work is there, but are you and I ready to involve others like us and different from us and take on, the heavy weight to move forward and to make a difference? I think we can, and on many different levels. And the levels start with our home, start with our schools, start with our religious centers, get involved in the wider community, get involved in politics, right? Make a difference wherever it counts, and you can make a difference the minute you step out of bed. Not just outside your home, but the minute you get out of bed, ask yourself, what will I do good today? And if you can't come up with at least one thing, get the heck back in bed.
You just gave us a gradation or a layering of, the different levels where all of this needs to happen. And this is absolutely right. And we agree on that. There's an individual level, there's a community level, there's getting involved in political events and contemporary issues. What if, this specific project and others like it, at the end of the day, if we want to organize ourselves, and you touched on a lot of these things, you do feel, and I think a lot of the members of the communities feel there's a fragmentation, there's a disunity. Hopefully we can bring people together. We can learn from the youth not to see through these blinders and see issues for what they really are and do outreach like they would do, and so on and so forth. But all of this, at the end of the day, if I were to go back to, we're lucky living in Canada where we have governments that actually care about these issues. They're willing to support, they're willing to fund, they're willing to recognize and talk about and make space for them. How do I turn this into something that I go back to a government of the day, be it municipal, provincial, federal, and I tell them, here is my assessment, the lay of the land of my community, and therefore this transforms into funding, programs, support. What does that look like? At the end of the day, what are we asking? If I'm asking the government for help, what does that help look like?
What's in it for the wider community, right? What's in it for the wider community? Because I don't think, I don't speak as anyone who's aspiring to be part of any government, but I'll speak as someone who's had experience to just life and so forth. So I speak very much as a layman here. I don't think anyone's going to give us handouts just because we want to do something better. If I say, I want to go out and get a really nice shirt and I can't afford it, please give me money. So, right.
This is a very important point. And thank you for raising that. That's a very important point. And that's why we're focusing on community, right? We've been talking about what can we do to help ourselves, but building on that.
Our message, if we look at, again, you asked us a Muslim, so I'm going to respond to you first through Islamic lens.
Yes.
The Islamic message didn't come to just the people in the desert. It came to humanity. And here, for anyone who's not Muslim and listening, Islam means to submit to a greater cause and to a greater will outside your thy will be done, as a Christian would say. That's what Islam means. And it means to do unto others as they would have as they would have done unto them. Not even, the golden rule, but the platinum rule. So it means Muhammad was first abduhu, then rasuluhu. He had to be of service before he could win the hearts of people and spread the message. We have to be of service to others before we can take any message, whether it's about the message of our needs and who we are in the community, or how we want to be part of the wider conversation, the wider community. We first have to be of service to people. And I think, in the Arabic language, people sometimes don't understand the beauty of the word abduhu. We translate it as slave. I'm not saying be my slave, servant, service, servant leadership. We hear today what's really buzzing around in leadership circles, servant leadership. This is what, Jesus Christ, alayhi salam, Nabi Isa said, this is what every prophet had come to be in service of delivering the message, but they could not penetrate people's heart. لا تقولوا أسلمنا بل قولوا آمنا, or the other way around. You cannot believe until you have submitted, and you submit to being of service to people before you can give that message that will transform people into something different. If we want to transform our lives and our children and our families and what it is to be Muslim in Canada, and we want funding to do that, how do we want to be engaged with the wider community, and what will we do differently? How will we be part of the larger discussions? How we can create a great Muslim lobby to go out and get money from governments at various levels. But what will we do with that money? Will we build bridges and walk towards other communities? Or will we build walls and stay within our mosques, segregated, closed up, not willing to share and learn and be part of the wider conversation? That was
Absolutely.
A rhetorical question.
I think, of course it was rhetorical, but I think it's the what's in it for me, for the person handing it out. If you're adopting this point of view of already being at service, if this is how you view the world, of what can I do to serve, then it kind of answers that right away. It will show in itself, and this is how you present it as well, and it becomes something very implementable, something that you can transform into policy, something you can transform into programs and services at a city level, at a province level, and a community level. So on my side, I'd like to end with asking you just to give us one last piece of advice. If you had one piece of advice, especially to the youth, what would that be? Before we end this beautiful discussion we're having, what would that piece of advice be?
So I've learned as a coach and as a father and as a person who's getting up in his years, don't give advice. Role model the behavior that you want to see in others. Don't role play it. When people see you behave in a certain way, they'll aspire to be like you. They will love you. They will accept you. You will belong. I don't think any of us wants anything more than that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful ending words for us. I think this was something that I would consider to be real talk between us. I thank you deeply and sincerely for your honesty, your openness, your vulnerability, your personal style in sharing with us, your life and your insights and your vision. And hopefully, as a community, we can learn a lot from this and keep moving in that direction, learning from each other, learning from the youth, and translating all of this to action within our communities and for the greater good in a Canadian society. So thank you so much. Thank you very much for having joined us. And hopefully our viewers enjoyed this as much as we did here. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we see you again in our next episode in Muslims Youth Matters podcast. Thank you so much, Brother
Thank you so
Mohamed.
much for the opportunity. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.